going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. You know who it is by now,
Jimothy.
So ladies and gents, with an attempt to further my knowledge on the deck that seems to be taking the Yu-Gi-Oh community by storm, Swordsoul, I thought I would record a mirror match at my most recent adventure to locals. Now this is actually two of my friends that are playing here, so it's quite interesting to see how they get on with each other. Now obviously Swordsoul's a strong strategy, there's no doubt about that. One card synchros is always going to be a strong strategy. Just look at Zodiacs for example. Obviously they're not synchros, but just being able to one card Xyz or just one card into any extra deck monsters that have a plethora of like negations or interactions is just super duper strong. So it looks like these guys have all shuffled up and are about to get into this duel, which is interesting to say the least. Now I haven't actually watched this duel back. I've seen glimpses of it, but I was actually playing on the table next to them, so I didn't actually know what they was actually doing. But we see our opponent start off here with a incredible Ecclesia to tribute itself to special summon a Mo-Yi from deck. And obviously unsummon Mo-Yi, whether it's normal or special, can reveal a worm in hand and then proceed to make a token to then obviously use that to tune itself, as well as get a draw and a search, which is just absolutely crazy. So this is why the strategy is so strong. Going into Shizhao is just super powerful. Being able to draw and then search into your deck to be able to add yourself another interruption to be able to kind of like interact with your opponent's field is crazy. So he decides to go and grab the Long Yuan, and this can discard a worm, I believe, to be able to special summon itself to the field. And then once it does, it can actually create a token to be able to special summon itself. So my buddy's just going straight in. He's not going to go through the phase of summoning token because they're both friends, so they understand how this deck works. So he actually manages to go into a Baron de Fleur. And if you didn't know, ladies and gents, that the summon of Long Yuan and then the token that it produces is actually a 5th summon. So if you did have Nibiru in hand, that would have been a perfect time to Nibiru just before the Baron de Fleur gets onto the field. But he's actually got a decent setup. As you can see, he's got Ash Blossom in hand. He's actually got one of his Fusion Destiny combo pieces in hand as well, which is an unfortunate event nevertheless. But we see that opponent starts off with his own incredible Ecclesia, special summoning it to the field, so he has not burnt his normal summon. Then obviously it's going to be able to tribute itself off to be able to then special summon a worm monster from deck, but that's going to get met with an Ash Blossom. And looking at my buddy's hand on the left here, who started off the turn or started off the duel, you can see a triple tactics talents, which is not going to really be doing much this turn, seeing as it's on his turn. So opponent then starts off with his own Mo-Yi that gets hit by the Xizhao, which negates it. And then my opponent does have the extender in Long Yuan, which is crazy, which then gets met by Baron de Fleur. So he's burnt a majority of his negates, and wow, oh wow, he held the Fusion Destiny. His hand was absolutely fire for going second, I'm not even gonna lie. As you can see, he's giving him a thumbs up because it's crazy that he managed to play through that many disruptions. He's played through an Ash, a negate, a hard negate at that, and he's managed to draw the Fusion Destiny. So we're gonna see Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer hit the field, which is a powerhouse of a card in of itself, and just being able to keep recurring itself out the graveyard. And in simplified game states, like I always say, ladies and gents, when you've got a card that has that much disruption, it is very difficult to play around. So Phoenix Enforcer is going to hit the field, and there's a reason why this card is so much money. It's a secret rare, it's not common to be able to be pulled, and it is a hell of an interaction with your opponent. So he then pops the Baron de Fleur, so there's no more follow-up for my opponent. So he decides to go into end phase, not deciding to attack into the Shizhao, because obviously the Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer does provide a buff, which actually kind of plays into some of the strategy here. So my buddy on the left is just checking his hand. He actually manages to pull out I believe that's a tie-eye. Oh no, I believe it's a Mo-Yi. So he then banishes a card, which then gets met with Call by the Grave. Oh wow. I believe it's a tie-eye. Yeah, it could be a tie-eye. So just thinking about what to do here, it decides to crash to remove the opponent's Swordsoul on field. Now this is where the interaction comes in, ladies and gents. Now initially we thought that the Destiny Phoenix Hero Enforcer would die, but then on thinking about it, it actually provides a debuff. So the Xijiao has actually lost a few attack points due to Destiny Hero Dasher as well as Celestial being in the graveyard. So it decides to negate and then destroy, but then obviously Phoenix Enforcer will come back on the following turn via its own effect. So it looks like both of our opponents have expended quite a lot of resources. Nevertheless, he decides to let my opponent proceed and then pass his turn. Now obviously he must have a few hand traps. So then my opponent decides to use Celestial in Graveyard, which is a beautiful card, banishing itself and the Dasher to be able to draw 2 cards, which is just absolutely crazy, especially in a simplified game state. Digging 2 cards deeper into your deck is a nice feeling. My opponent's still holding the Triple Tactics talents, which is interesting because I would have thought he would have used it the previous turn, but nevertheless he's going to take some damage here via the Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer, and looking at his hand, it does not look like the best. Ideally you would want to get rid of that Celestial and put it in grave to be able to then potentially draw, but obviously he hasn't got another hero monster in grave, so it's a bit of a dead card at the moment. However, we do see the Vishuda hit the field, and he's actually going to link off the Vishuda to go straight into the Monk of the Tenyi. And then on summon, obviously we don't want Monk sticking to field because then he could get a potential bounce with the Vishuda. So then he uses the Phoenix Enforcer effect to pop the Monk of the Tenyi, and then Triple Tactics talents will follow. So he hasn't burnt his normal summon here, but he is facing 2 back row, and that could potentially be like a Solemn Strike. It could be an Infinite Impermanence. Could be a whole host of things. Obviously Impermanent Strike is probably the most impactful. He does find another Ecclesia, which is a nice feeling. So Ecclesia will tribute itself to special summon a monster from the deck. In this instance, it's definitely going to be the... Oh, he's gone for the tie-eye. So it was actually Mo Yi that was the previous one. And that gets met with an Infinite Impermanence. Wow. So no effect being able to be resolved in the form of the tie-eye. And he just goes straight into battle phase and decides to attack. And then main phase 2, he sets 1 and then passes. Now standby phase, Destiny Phoenix Enforcer will then return to the field, just checking the graveyard to see what potential plays he has next. And he actually, oh my gosh, is that Sacred Summit that he pulls off the top? I believe it's a Monster Reborn for a Worm Monster. So then he brings back the Mo Yi, reveals the Long Young in hand, and then gets hit with an Effect Veiler, which is something that can actually shut down a Swordsoul player's turn depending on the hand they've got. And wow, he actually draws a Triple Tactics talent, and he decides to take the monster, which would mean he has got enough on board to be able to deal lethal, and there's no response from my opponent, who had a Forbidden Chalice set, and that is the end of game 1. So that was an unfortunate series of events. Looking back on it, you think to yourself, could there have been an opportunity to use the Triple Tactics talent earlier? Potentially not, we never know, but nevertheless, that game is done and dusted, over and done with. We're on to game number 2. Now the opponent starts off with a incredible Ecclesia, which is a nice rip. To be able to go straight into a Mo Yi. The Mo Yi will activate its effect to reveal a Swordsoul card, but then gets hit with an Effect Veiler. Wow, okay. So like I mentioned previously, ladies and gents, Effect Veiler could potentially end an opponent's turn, depending on the hand that they've got, and in this instance it definitely has. So he decides to set 3 and then pass turn, and then on the standby phase of the opponent's turn, he flips the anti-spell Fragrance. So no spells this turn. However, the opponent does start off with a Vishuda, which is very nice indeed to be able to get a bounce of some sort without actually committing a normal summon. A very powerful card, to be honest, and something that was ran in August way back in the day when it was the Eternal format. So opponent's just thinking here, deciding what he wants to bounce. Now potentially you would go for the one of the two back row because it's an unknown quantity. So you kind of want to get rid of one of the back row just to be able to kind of like proceed without having to deal with like an Infinite Impermanence, a Solemn Strike, because those are two of the most common back rows that you're potentially going to see. So he decides to just basically blind bounce one of the opponent's cards. So he's got one less unknown factor to deal with, and then starts off his turn with the normal summon of a Mo Yi, revealing a Mo Yi in hand, which is crazy. So then Mo Yi would then make itself a token, a tuner token to be more specific, to be able to then synchro summon into Shi Zhao and then obviously get the draw off the Mo Yi. So he's going to protect the Shi Zhao search by chain blocking with the Mo Yi. So Mo Yi is going to allow the draw, and then Shi Zhao is going to allow him to search his deck for a Swordsoul card. I believe it's a card. I think you can search these spell or traps. Oh no, it's actually a Swordsoul card, which is crazy. So he decides to go for the extender in the Long Yuan. So he's actually searched the extender, which is nice. Now we still got an unknown quantity in that back row. It could be a Solemn Strike. However, I do feel like you probably would have shotgunned the strike earlier, but you don't know what you're playing into, especially with extenders in hand. And he actually pitches another Vishuddha, so he had two in hand, which is crazy. Long Yuan then will allow him to make himself a tuner token, and as Long Yuan is a 6 and the tuner token will be a level 4, he is able to make the Baron de Fleur. Now because Long Yuan was used as a synchro material, you can burn your opponent for 1200 damage, which is just another crazy thing that's enabled to do. So opponent on the left is actually on 6800 life points, and he's facing down a Baron de Fleur, which can pop a card, as well as a Shi Zhao, which is a negate. So he actually activates his Baron de Fleur, targeting the last unknown back row, and in this instance it was an Imperial Order. Wow, okay. So he had a lot of spell and a lot of spell hate, to be honest. So then he proceeds to go into battle phase. He attacks over the opponent's Mo Yi and does some hefty battle damage, because Baron de Fleur is actually got quite a considerable attack. So 4100 damage in total. So my opponent is on top deck mode. He's facing down a Baron de Fleur, which is an Omni Negate, a Shi Zhao, which is basically an Effect Veiler, as well as a unknown back row. So it's not looking too healthy. He's also on 2700 life points. Oh, and he's taking 1000. Oh, because of the he forgot to calculate the Monk of the Tenny. So he's actually on 1700. He's got no monsters on field. So he is looking mighty weak in this position. He actually activates the Baron de Fleur to pop the back row, which was a Solemn Strike. So he decides to strike the Baron de Fleur, expending 1500 life points. Now he's only on 200 life points. He's got one card left on field, well, one face down card left on field, as well as the anti-spell fragrance. So he's not in the best of positions, and my opponent decides to go into battle phase, and that is it, ladies and gentlemen. So Swordsoul showing its thing. Interesting to say the least. Things that I've taken away from this game: Effect Veiler obviously is a nice card against this deck, as well as Infinite Impermanence. It can end a turn depending on your opponent's hand and their setup, but nevertheless something that I'm going to be practicing against over the coming few weeks, getting ready for this regional basically. So yeah. But anyway, ladies and gents, we find ourselves at the end of another video. Hopefully you enjoyed this live duel between two Swordsoul players, and if you do like this content, you know what to do by now. Hit that like button, share, subscribe, all of that beautiful good stuff, and I will definitely see you guys on the next video. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.